Hi everyone and welcome back to my studying. Today I would like to talk about a classic science fiction novel, a tale of social satire, commentary, and monkey business, which is of course Planet of the Apes by Pierre Boulle, or Monkey Planet as it is known in the original French text. Now, Pierre Boulle is an interesting figure and someone who got a bit overshadowed by the sheer weight of the franchise that was spawned from the first novel, or rather, the first movie that was based on his novel, because we had a pretty good first movie in the 68, which was co-written by Rod Serling of television fame, or of Twilight Zone fame, who was a brilliant writer. Then we had 4 subsequent sequels during the late 60s, 70s that continued the story. And then we had a really bad Tim Burton film, which I recently revisited. It's really bad. The makeup is good, but the movie is, it's not good. And then we had what I think were the best of the bunch, the recent 3 reboot movies, the newest trilogy. And with all this talk and other crossover media, because we had both comics made by different comic book companies even, and we had crossovers, parodies, from Simpsons to anything at all. It really permeated pop culture, especially the 60s movie. The iconic ending, the twist ending with the Statue of Liberty and Charlton Heston going large ham, shouting, damn you all to hell, and all that stuff. I think that the novel and Boulle himself got buried underneath it. And I would like to talk about the author as well, because he considered this novel to be his least successful or least worthy of accolades. That was his own opinion. And he also insisted that he did not write science fiction. He insisted that this was just a satire or a farce of sorts. And when the book came out, it was really celebrated, and it was probably his most commercially successful book, ironically enough. But also, what's always interesting to me is that the same person, Pierre Boulle, who wrote Planet of the Apes, also wrote Bridge of the River Kwai, the award-winning, celebrated Best Picture winner movie. And on a surface level, you'll think, wow, this same person wrote such vastly different works of art, of literature. We had, at least on the surface, a satirical, inherently pulpy in its own premise book about apes ruling the world, being on the top of the social regime. And then on the other hand, you have a serious story about prisoners of war being forced to do manual labor. But having read about the author and learning that he was actually a spy in World War II, and he got captured, and he was put to forced labor for 2 years, I believe. And a lot of those experiences shaped his life. And before the war, he was an engineer, and then he was a spy. And when the war ended, he took up writing and became a writer, and I think he succeeded. So let us talk about the novel itself. And again, it is impossible, as much as I would like to talk only about the novel, it is impossible to talk about the novel without talking about the original film, because they're so deeply tied. Pierre Boulle himself contributed to the screenplay as some of the earlier versions, and he was actually quite happy with the movie itself. And let us talk through that prism, the differences. So, the movie version has the framing of 3 astronauts board a special space ship which uses almost as fast as light traveling technology, which means that the time dilation, the concept of the faster you go, the slower time passes for you who are moving than for the everyone you left behind. So if you're moving in a ship, you will not age. So let us briefly talk about the narrative framework of the novel, the framing device of the movie, and in between the differences. So the novel starts with this pair of space travelers who uncover a message in a bottle, literally in space. And so let us talk about the narrative and the framing device of the novel in regards to the movie. Because in the novel, the framework is as such. We have this extravagant pair of space travelers who find a message in a bottle in space which contains a recollection of events that transpired on Planet of the Apes. And then we switch the narrative to point of view of the writer of those recollections. And then we learned that this writer, this journalist, belonged to a crew of 4. One of them was a world-renowned physicist, scientist, his assistant, an ape, a trained ape that they had with him, and himself, the writer. And they went on this one-way journey to the distant star of Betelgeuse in hopes of finding new life, new discoveries. Because the professor is a bit of a misanthrope, and the rest were just there for the ride, I guess. And because of the time dilation, an enormous amount of time would pass in between. So, since they had this technology to travel almost of the speed of light, it would take them 700 years, or rather 700 years would pass back in their home in regards to them. So they go to this Betelgeuse, they land on the planet around it, and as they're landing, as they're entering the orbit, they see traces of civilization, traces of the industry. So they aim to find intelligent life. They expect to find something entirely different. But what they find is humans, naked and mute humans, who are not at the cognitive level as they are. They look identically human as they do, but they cannot form human speech. They are unable to problem solve or anything of that matter. More than that, the humans there have this aversion to clothing and to technology, because as our heroes, if they're heroes, are bathing in a lake and trying to communicate with one of the tribesmen, the woman they dub Nova, the other tribesmen trash their landing pad and their clothing, which effectively leaves them stranded on the planet. So as the trio, minus the monkey who escaped into the woods, are trying to accommodate to their life in this new planet with these primitive humans, they're raided by intelligent monkeys. And monkeys are capturing all of them as livestock and putting them into pens. And our hero is separated from his companions, And essentially what happens is he is and other humans are being studied by humans, by monkeys, to discover the origins of their own species, because the chimpanzees that are experimenting on humans have this theory that human is the progenitor of apes, which is somewhat a controversial theory. Turns out that the monkey society is divided into three vague castes. So we have chimpanzees, who are academics, who are the scientists, the doctors. Then we have orangutans, who are, for the most part, the ones in authority, the politicians, the ones who push dogmas and scientific truths. And the gorillas, who are the soldiers and the muscle, essentially, the industrial backbone of their society. So what happens is our hero tries to show his captors, who are studying him, that he is different by the other captured humans. Even though, since he lost his clothing, he looks like them, he makes great effort to solve their tests with great ability, because everyone around him is failing those basic behavioral tests, problem-solving tests. You know, the tests that are used for development of children and such, where you have to select appropriate shapes and things of that nature. More than that, with time, he manages to learn their language, which allows him to communicate with the scientists that are studying him, and he convinces them that he's different. But for the longest time, he is unable to convince the ruling class that he's different, because they maintain that even his speech and intelligence is feigned, it's parroted. He is an imitator, he is not a sapient being, because they find the idea of human who is similar to ape in his mental abilities somewhat offensive. But with time, he manages to free himself, and he is granted a right to wear clothes. And the human, from the start of the story, Nova, is paired up with him, and they have a son. And he even predicts that his son and their sort of grandsons and so forth will have ability to talk and be cognizant, such as he is. And at the end of the story, the monkeys, who have actually stagnated as a species for the longest time, they did not innovate their technology, but they were obsessed with finding out their origins. They start to make first space travel tests. And seeing an opportunity, our hero, with his new family, because he, again, has, I guess, a wife and a son now, boards this space program in hopes of returning home, because as was with our world, the real world, the first tests were done with monkeys and dogs being sent to space. So the monkeys themselves, being the dominant species, are sending humans and such into space as a sort of a test. So he boards the spaceship, goes into the space, and he, long story short, lands into Paris, only to discover that yes, it's full of French-speaking beings, but these French-speaking beings around him are apes. And that's the twist ending. But the twist does not end there. Another twist in the story is that the couple from the beginning that found the message in a bottle were actually apes as well, which indicates that the intelligent human as such have completely vanished from the universe. So that's that. That's the twist, or the twists plural, of the book. In the movie, it's much more simpler and much more streamlined. And I think in some accounts better, but in some accounts not. So let's talk about things that I enjoyed in the book. I enjoyed the social commentary the most, because the book is at best this social satire akin to Jonathan Swift, like Gulliver's Travels. You know, in Gulliver's Travels, this traveler Gulliver travels the high seas. He washes ashore of a society where he is a giant and everyone around him is a small person. And then again, he escapes and washes ashore in a society of giants and he's a small person, which allows for a shift in perspective and dynamics of power, and allows for a powerful social commentary, which I think this book does well, where it makes you think about how much of a fluke the humanity is, how much of our scientific progress was based on animal cruelty. Should we allow this to progress? How much of our social constructs are also a fluke? We see apes having this silly dogmas and superstitions because they are so different from ours dogmas and superstitions, but in the end they're all dogmas and superstitions and they're all inherently skewed. And in that way, this book is brilliant. It's also quite interesting in the approach it takes. It doesn't go too fast with its development, even though it's a short book. It's well paced. For example, the language is different from our own because, well, the twist is they're not on Earth. But then again, the author takes the time for the protagonist to adjust to the society. At first, he learns very basic stuff, such as repeating patterns, which indicates the names of the apes, then basic verbs, and then full-on speeches and fluency. Something I also appreciated. I also appreciated that the apes had a high level of advancement themselves, but we learned that they have stagnated for a long, long time, meaning they have not been progressing nearly as fast as human society was. If you look at the 20th century, the leap in scientific advancement was huge. Some of it, of course, was thanks to war, but yeah. And the things that I didn't like, well, characterization. The author wasn't, I wager, interested in making distinct characters because his characters are all in the service of the social satire, of the social commentary. So none of them really comes across as unique or memorable. Also, some of the, especially early observations about the female character, Nova, were a bit creepy. Especially because there's this constant reminder of the audience that, well, this is essentially an animal. This would be like, I'm not gonna say bestiality, but this is gonna be like seeing someone who is mentally handicapped as as a sexual object. And in parts it kind of made me uncomfortable, especially since in the end they even have children. I wasn't into that, but I guess that's 60s for you, I suppose. It's brief, it's on point, which I appreciate, and I think the movie inherently works better as a one-off if you ignore all of the sequels, because one completely unneeded element of the book is the framing narrative. framing narrative, which provides an additional twist of the couple that finds this diary, these writings, are also apes themselves, serves no purpose. It adds nothing to the story, because we already have a twist when the humans return to the Earth, and Earth being full of apes. The idea that the apes will progress into the space age themselves already exists on its own, because on Beetlejuice, they already progressed. You see where I'm going with this. It's completely obsolete. You don't need it. It adds nothing. It's silly. And yeah, and the dialogue between those apes is also quite silly. So this is me discussing and going through my thoughts about this novel. Thank you everyone for following me, especially for my patrons on Patreon. Please do like and subscribe if you are so inclined. And next time, who knows? I was thinking about going through some of my favorite comic books, non-superhero comic books that I enjoyed, and sharing that with all of you. So thank you, and see you next time. Bye-bye.